Every third trial is a piece of shit. Most of Danganronpa trials fall into the good or very good category. There aren't too many trials that are bad or very bad. However, the ones that are generally going to be the third trials of each game. Those are the lowest rated trials by the community in each game by far. But why? What dooms every single Chapter 3 to just be complete abysmal dogshit? Well, let's talk about the key elements they all share, and why they don't work, why they're not liked, and maybe some ideas for how they could have been improved. The first and most obvious thing that every single third trial has is a double murder. And the problem with a double murder is, okay, at the base value, right, you're killing more characters. So people are going to be angrier because, you know, rather than just 2 characters dying and the people that like those 2 characters getting annoyed, it's 3 characters dying. So the people that like that extra third character are also getting annoyed. That is the simplest reason why people don't like the Chapter 3s. It's deeper than that. It gets a bit more objective and intellectual than just that. But the fact of the matter is, you're killing more characters, so you're going to annoy people. That's the immediate thing that you can think about as to why these don't work that well. But a big reason why these double murders don't work is because there's no reason for them to really happen. Okay, Danganronpa, killing is an act of necessity, an act of survival. It's not something you do because you want to kill more people. That's why these don't really work. Because, yeah, even though they, like, especially with Chapter 3 in Danganronpa 2 and V3, they kind of had to kill the second person. Well, actually, no, that's a lie. They had to win the second game's third trial, but not the third one. And that's the problem. It's not an act of necessity or survival. It's just done to kill off more characters, and it feels like the person who's killed for no reason is kind of wasted. You know, that's a problem. Another thing about the third trials is they're always unnecessarily complicated, because they're trying to be more complicated than they actually are, and it just gets a bit stupid at times. You can easily make a complex trial with just one person dying. You know, it's been proven time and time again that this is very easy to do, and is usually, in those cases, done much better than when they try and fucking do all this convoluted shit because there's 2 different people dying. In fact, I'd say the concept of them having a double murder and then things being more complicated is wasted completely, because 9 times out of 10, only one of the victims is actually really important to the case. The other one just died because they fucking showed up there, and that's it. I would say Chapter 3 of the first game is the least offensive of these ones, but it's still not fantastic because of the way it's written and made, and honestly, I feel like the way it was done, it's kind of character assassination, because Celeste is supposed to be really smart and cunning and calculated, but she's like a fucking dickhead and an idiot. She's making everything too complicated, but by doing what she did, it made her look incompetent because it was incredibly obvious that she was the killer, so yeah. Another key factor about every third trial is there's not really much emotion to them. You know, it's really just a complicated murder that's complicated for no reason, with a lot of elements that kind of get ignored and sidelined, which is just kind of weird because it's contradictory to the concept of having a double murder for the sake of being more complicated, but, you know, I digress. And there's no emotion because, well, the fucking killer just kind of crashes out and goes a bit crazy, and there's no emotion to it, there's nothing interesting to it. It reaches a point where you expect it, especially by the third game, and the third game takes it to a whole new level of ridiculous. Celeste is, again, I think Trial 3 of the first game is the least offensive of all these. I think the third trials of the second and third games are definitely far worse, but the third trial of the first game is still definitely the weakest trial in the game. Celeste isn't as bad as the other 2, and she just kind of crashes out like a normal person would. She's just a bit crazy. Mikan and Korekio, however, oh yeah, they're not great. They're kind of executed very poorly, no pun intended, because, you know, Mikan was executed very poorly in that sense, but also just the characters were executed poorly. And I mean, Chapter 3 of Danganronpa 2, the whole despair disease shit, it was just kind of stupid. And again, I feel like Mikan was a very obvious killer once you actually like think hard about what's actually gone on. And same with, you know, Trial 3 of the third game, it's very obvious that Korekio was the killer. Korekio was the first person suspected in Trial 3, and usually that means that person isn't going to be the killer because there's more to it. That's the entire point. But no, Korekio was the killer. He killed both of them. They figured out that he killed one of them in the first part of the trial, and then by the end it turned out, yes, he has indeed killed both of them, even though he didn't need to. But he's a serial killer or whatever, so I guess they gave a genuine reason, but it's still fucking stupid. Every single double murder is just wasted potential, because you could have a double murder and have it so that there is something genuinely interesting going on. I think I mentioned in a previous video, the idea that, you know, V3 brought up the fact that if you kill someone and then someone else kills someone, only one of those black ones will count. If there are 2 murderers and 2 culprits in one trial and one gets away, that would be really, really interesting and cool and an actual fascinating way to do a double murder. But no, they didn't do it, because why would they do that? Why would they break away from the formula? Okay, sorry, I know I talk about that kind of stuff a lot, but this is one of the examples of why I think the formula this game follows so strictly is just a bit ridiculous, because you've done a double murder 3 times. No reason for it. No reason for it to be done 3 times, because it was handled the same way every single time, and it was handled stupidly. Chapter 3s are predictable, and they are poorly written, and the case logic is all over the place. Hiyoko's murder weapon was never even found out, or touched upon, or even asked about. It was completely sidelined and forgotten. And the second victim is always forgotten about. Ibuki is the main focus of the victim in Danganronpa 2's 3rd trial. And Tenko is the main attraction. Well, I mean, they focus on Angie a bit more than they did Hiyoko, I guess, but even then, Tenko is the main attraction, and Angie just died because she was there. Tenko had no reason to die. She was killed because that was the setup that Korekiyo was producing in the first place. And yes, like I said, I know there was an actual reason why it was done like that, but I still think it's stupid. And there was also no reason for Celeste to kill 2 people. I don't even know why she did. The logic there was probably doing it to, you know, overcomplicate things and no one can really understand anything, but the opposite kind of happened because she left too much evidence and it was very obvious that she was the one who killed everyone. So, basically, the chapter 3s don't work. So, before I wrap this video up, how would I improve the 3rd chapters? Well, like I just outlined previously, having 2 killers and 2 victims would be really interesting, because having that killer live on for the rest of the game could create some really interesting dynamics between some of the characters, because we've never been able to see something like that before. I don't know why they wouldn't do that, because it would be unpredictable, it would make things more interesting, but it would also just be something that you can't immediately say, oh, yeah, I know exactly what's going on here, because if they do another double murder in Danganronpa 2x2 and it follows the exact same strict formula that every single other one does, then I'm going to be disappointed, to be honest with you. Another way they could do it is spice it up a bit. Have it so the second person who's killed actually has a reason to have been killed. Because at least in the first game's 3rd trial, there was a whole complex plan about it. There was no real reason for Celeste to kill 2 people, absolutely not. But what if there was? What if there was a genuine reason? What if there was something changed with the rules, something to do with a motive, something that would give the killer an incentive to kill 2 people, and for those 2 victims to actually be focused on the trial, rather than just one of them, and then the second one is like sidelined for 80% of the trial. Anyway, that's my thoughts. I do think the chapter 3s are bad. I definitely think chapter 3 of Danganronpa 1 is the least egregious. I actually think that one's kind of okay and a fine trial. It's still flawed, definitely, but chapter 3 of Danganronpa 2 and V3 are definitely the worst ones. Those ones are very, very piss poor, abysmal dog shit. What's the opposite of Zenith of the Medium? Dog shit of the Medium? I'm yapping. Thank you to Ella for being a super proxter and being a channel member. If you want to subscribe, please do for more Danganronpa. It would help me out a lot. Leave a like on the video, follow my social medias, and I will see you all later. Peace out.